I'm a 2013 pass out of IIM Calcutta. I have been working with Microsoft. Uh, I was working with Microsoft for last 8 years, and in the product management space, I was catering to the product space of both on the consumer experience side and also on data and analytics. My passion towards data and analytics is taking a taking a forward step compared to what it was when I started my career. So post my MBA, I did a program with Bitfirani on business and analytics, so to keep myself upgrade. As of now, my last assignment with uh, Microsoft goes to be enabling uh, data platform for the uh, Microsoft devices group. So that is taking care of entire Xbox, Surface, hardware supply chain operations. So I was a platform owner or the product owner or product manager for the big data platform, where we had close to a 2.5 petabytes of data. And on a daily basis, we used to get close to 300 terabytes of data into the system. So overall, the passion for solving problems is where I have been working both as a product manager and especially on the data side. So by graduation, I'm a computer science graduate from 2005. So I had about 6 years of experience before my B-School. I am Calcutta between 2011 and 2013, and then I have been a product manager with Microsoft. I will be joining soon with Amazon. Because product management can be in any sector. For example, you can be a product manager in a e-commerce space, to a fintech startup, to hardware devices like HoloLens, or to even a IoT devices, etc. So product management as a whole, the career path is primarily someone would start as a associate product manager. Then they would take the route of becoming a product manager, senior product manager, uh, group product manager. Then they will be getting more into CPO as the highest level, where it is chief product owner is the, or chief product officer is what the title goes. It again varies from company to company. If you go to a very structured organizations like Microsoft or Amazon, you will have multiple layers of associate product manager, or program manager in Microsoft. So title also differs. So again, if you go to startups, the structure will be probably a flatter compared to the hierarchical nature with Microsoft or Amazon. So as a whole, the career graph is you will start as a junior level, and you can become one of the CXO categories, because today product officers are also considered in the chief CXO roles. So there is a huge growth. So product management as an aspect goes with how you solve uh, an opportunity or a problem for a customer. So irrespective of your domain, that is what I would look at. Irrespective of your domain, you should be able to understand uh, your domain specific needs from a customer point of view. And the moment you are aware of that, that drives your day in, day out as a product manager in any company. So if there is no customer, there is no product. So end of the day, your objective is to build something or enable or build an experience, something that will solve a particular customer segment. Just to talk an example, uh, You could build a Swiggy kind of an app solving the customers for the delivery needs, versus you could build a big data analytics platform, which I'm doing right now, to improve the business operations over a period of time. So end of the day, my customer might change from a B2C to a B2B to a B2E, which is a business to employee segment as well. So you can have a business to customer product. You can have a business to business product SaaS solutions like Salesforce, uh, Azure, and then you can have technology platforms again like Azure, AWS. So basically, your customer matters the most. So the moment you can understand your customer, that is where your journey starts as a product. General recruiter looks for is your analytical skills. That comes as a first thing. Your ability to see a problem as an opportunity, because everyone can say there is a problem lying out there, but how can you convert that into an opportunity is what they look at. The third and most important thing that comes is your structured thinking process. So you're not building solution overnight. So for example, if you're sitting an interview of an hour, your objective is not to solve the problem, but your objective is to explore as many possible scenarios around that problem or opportunity. So just to give an example, you should always start with the customer. So your customer, for example, if you're solving a parking problem for IIM Calcutta, just to take a very hypothetical example, what does the parking means for a student? What does the parking means for a teacher? What does the parking means for a security guard? What does the parking means for a guy who is building that parking space, the real estate agent or anyone? So you should always look at that from the person who is acting at a given point in time. For a student, it is all about accessibility to the classroom. For a faculty, it is about getting that luxury space if they're using a car. For a security guard, it is about being able to manage the parked vehicles appropriately, like starting from arrangement to who is taking whose vehicle. Is there an opportunity? For a construction guy, the guy who is coming and building that space for parking, how much is the space that he can get? What could be the challenges for the student? So in every aspect, I'm looking at a different customer. I'm looking at a different customer for that particular point of view, and I'm trying to identify more scenarios. Okay. From a student perspective, just to give a more details for someone who is preparing for an interview, right? There could be a male student versus a female student. They would have their own preferences. Or there could be a disabled student versus a differently able student versus a normal student who might have special needs. So what all comes in? Or is there a person who is coming with, for example, parking for a person coming from LVH to a student block versus OH to student block? So you should be able to look at the problem from various scenarios. The moment you do all the scenarios, your solution comes as a bucket covering the maximum areas. So that is where you will find an optimum solution. So if you are sitting in an interview, don't try to tell them, I will solve it by putting a 3x3 meter space and putting a 10 cycle stands, one car, and a security guard to have an umbrella where he can sit and to make sure that the rain doesn't interrupt. But that is just solving. But you did not even look at what are the scenarios. In that student block, are we going to get more than one car? Are we going to get more than 10 cycles? You'll be able to get that only when you analyze your customer or the person whom you're going to solve in the most detailed manner. The more you do it, the easier your solutions and the impact for your solutions will be closer to the need for the customer. So that is one thing that comes in. And most important thing is, again, this is a myth. People think there is a need for them to be technically expert for being a product manager. You're not supposed to be technically expert, but you should be technically aware. You should be able to say whether you need to put a cloud solution versus an on-premise solution. What is a cloud? What is an on-premise? So you should be aware of the technology. You need not be an expert in that. There are very few companies who might look for a very technology-centric product manager. Their roles are very specific. For example, if Amazon is coming to a campus and you have a technical program manager as an opening, you have multiple job roles from Amazon. For example, you have a product manager, you have a technical program manager, and a program manager. So the technical program manager role, if someone is applying, then they should have a lot of hands-on experience on technology. But if someone is more of a product manager or a program manager, they should be technically aware of things. They need not be an expert in that technology. They need not be solving problems by technology, but they should be solving problems, as I called out, looking from a customer point of view, being able to build the customer needs. And once this customer perspective has been brought in, you should be able to structurally say, what is the first problem I will solve versus what is the last problem I will solve. That is based on the impact. For example, you want to solve a parking problem, but you understand from your customers that the people coming from LVH are having a higher need. Is there a need for you to build something very specific to those users? It need not be a software solution always. Whenever you build a system, you should also consider the ecosystem. So is there a right road for someone to come from a LVS to a student block by road? Is there a need for you to think about it? See, if there is no road, then you building a parking solution for LVS students is of no use. As simple as that, right? So you should be able to think about all those dimensions. So the more you can think about a dimension and various aspects of the customer you're trying to solve, the clearer your structure of thinking and your ability to succeed in the job matters a lot. Okay. I think I can talk at length, but yeah, this is like at a brief I can say about this. Yeah. I think one thing is people expect that they should be technically expert. That is one thing I already called out. So you need not be technically expert, but you need to be technically aware. Second thing people think is product managers build solutions. We don't build solutions. We define problems. We define possible scenarios. There is always an engineering team who give a solution to you. So you're not building solutions, but you're building, you're defining the problems. You're putting your thoughts around what the problems are. The third and most important myth that people think is, if I have to be an e-commerce product manager, I have to know in and out of e-commerce. Your domain is a necessity, but you can build on it. But you should be able to think as a product manager. See, the thought process of product management is what matters a lot. Yeah. If you work for 1-2 months, you can always build any domain. That is one more thing. Many people think that product manager is a people management role. It is not a people management role. So product manager is a very individual contributor role till you reach a group product manager or a vice president of product management kind of a role. Until then, you are an individual contributor and you don't have any authority on the people who are working with you, but you have to influence them. How can you influence them? You can only influence them with your clarity of thoughts and clarity of explaining why doing something is important. So that is what a typical myth on product manager, thinking that manager title is a people management. It is not a people management. One other thing that people think is product management doesn't have roles beyond product management. There are exit options for product managers also. Many people think that, oh, if I become a product manager, my exit options are only in the product management. That is not true. But again, any change of career need additional skills. Uh, but at the same time, you can have exit options with the product. Yeah, so you can become into a strategy role where you can, once you work for a few years in a specific domain, you can look for strategic options. So you can become a strategy kind of role. The second and very important side of product management that comes in is over a period of time, you can also become a consultant for that particular domain. So, for example, today I worked on supply chain for over 3 years. So I have a lot of awareness about supply chain. And if I'm looking at my own free time, I look at freelancing options in supply chain because I know in and out of supply chain. So you can become a freelancer or consultant into the supply chain process. Again, another exit option which is like always available for anyone is entrepreneur. And as a product manager, your experience is very, very valuable to become an entrepreneur because you are trying to understand the customer, you are trying to understand the business area that you're working. So the more understanding you have about a customer that you're trying to solve, the more successful you can be as a product, as an entrepreneur in future. So entrepreneur is one definitely great option for someone looking at an exit option. I think I gave you 3 of them, but yeah, I think that is good enough. I mean, again, one more great product management opportunity that is coming is I see many of my colleagues with good experience are getting into education space as well. So one of my manager, my immediate manager in Microsoft, is also a professor in ISB in the product management space. So he's doing it out of his passion, but even that is a great opportunity in the long term because he has worked for over the years and he built that academic requirement and he got into that. One another area where you have to really build your skill to get into that space is being onto the data scientist or being a data science leader. I'm not saying you will go and do a coding, but the more you become a product manager over a period of time because of your understanding towards customer and problems, and if you have certain data skills, you can become a data leading the data of a particular division or those areas as well. I think it is as good as Genman. So I cover the marketing the most, specifically understanding the customer coming in. So marketing as a course comes very handy for me. The second and the most important thing that comes to my listing is the statistics, because I'm a data guy again. Every product manager has to understand data. They should be able to interpret the data. So any skills on your data, your statistics and the basics for data is something very important. The third area that I definitely believe is very useful is the subject of strategy. So what we learn as a strategy subject, I mean, if I did a couple of minors in that, I mean, other subjects in strategy. So strategy is very important because you have to always make a decision between 3 or 4 options and what really matters the most and how is your competitor handling it. So those things come. So this is all about a product management in general. But if you ask me, if you're getting into the domain. For example, when I worked on supply chain, the supply chain course or the operations management course that I did in MBA has been very handy for me. Along with that, when I was actually doing a GDPR implementation, that is a data privacy implementation, even the legal course that I did on Calcutta was very helpful, because when I'm talking to the lawyers, I could get a sense of what that legal knowledge is all. So every subject has a sense for it. If you're getting into fintech, finance is obviously yes. So you have to be really aware of the financial part of it. So your finance subject comes in. So every subject has a value proposition, but it again depends on uh, how deep you want to go in a specific area. Is something depends on your job opportunity. So if you cover various aspects, I think that comes handy, and you can always go deep as you need. I think for me, it was kind of an, there were like a couple of odd choices for me when I joined MBA, because I was coming with 6 years of technical experience. I could have either got into a IT consulting or into product management. So when I was on campus, I definitely had a few conversations with the professors. Uh, and I also had conversations with the people who actually interned with various companies. So I had conversations with people who went to Accenture, IT consulting, those kind of companies. And I also had conversations with people who went to Microsoft, Amazon, and other product companies at that time, like 197 or Paytm. So I had conversations with the seniors, which definitely helped me like, okay, what could be the right choice? So my preference was always product management, and then it was IT consulting. Luckily, I got both my internship and my final job offer with Microsoft. My ability to solve the problems, looking at it from a customer point of view, is something that mattered the most. Because even in my 6 years of IT experience, I was never a sole developer. I did job of being a BD, business development guy, being a kind of pseudo project manager, handling the timelines and everything. I always had conversations with my clients. So those aspects of understanding my clients, client structures, that was one of the things. So second thing is storytelling. Storytelling matters a lot. So you should be able to tell a story as a product manager. I mean, I think storytelling is a common need in any job role that we are getting into. But as a product manager, you should be a good storyteller. Storytelling was my another strong aspect, because starting from my graduation days, I used to participate in uh, a lot of activities related to debating, being part of group discussions and all. So storytelling was one more aspect. Of course, my technical awareness or my technology depth was always a positive for me, but I still put my analytical thinking, looking from a customer point of view, and storytelling were the bigger traits that mattered to me when I was getting into the product management. Uh, I think I covered these things before as well. Don't try to solve the problems in the interview. Don't think that you need a lot of technical knowledge to crack this interview. Uh, Build more muscle on your structured thinking, customer understanding, and those. Uh, if someone wants to read a few books around this, the books I would recommend are Start with Why. That's a book, Start with Why. The second book that I would recommend is, if you're very interview focused, there is a book called Cracking the PM Interview. So that is another book that you can always look to understand more about companies, what do they do, what do they look for in a PM and all those. So every company has their own dimension. I would say every division of a company have their own dimension, but Crack the PM Interview is a good book to look at. The third book that I would always recommend people is Thinking Backwards. This is a very small book which gives you a lot of perspective to be successful as a PM. So Thinking Backwards is another book. There are quite a few other books that I can recommend, but these are the three books that I would strongly recommend people to read. If someone really have time and they want to really read, Lean Startup is another book. 0 to 1 is another book. 0 to 1 is a great book if someone has a entrepreneurial aspirations. That will help you a lot. But I think if you are a PGP1, I know you're crunch on time, so I would strongly recommend you to try to complete first 3 portions of Start With Why, and do look at Crack the PM Interview. Crack the PM Interview is a very quick book. You can read it like over 2 nights or so. Yeah. Then Thinking Backwards is something I would recommend you if you have time. But as you get into PGP2, if PGP2 is trying for a PM interview, I would recommend all the 5 books.
I'm Soham. I'm born and brought up here in Calcutta, went to school here, and then decided to go for electrical engineering to a private university in West Bengal called Haldia Institute of Technology. I studied there for 4 years, and after that I was fortunate to get an opportunity to work at Infosys, for which I left for training in Mysore. And after the training in Mysore, I worked in Infosys Hyderabad, at Hyderabad STP, beautiful campus, and I learned a lot there in the 2 years. And after that, I was lucky to be able to come here and join on the few through the CAT for an MBA. And yep, that's me before the MBA. I like football a lot. I'm a big Arsenal fan, and it's also a lot of pain and sometimes a little bit of joy as well. And I'm a sort of a tech enthusiast. I was a sort of kid who used to root their phones back in the day. I was running an Amazon, I think a Samsung Android case, and I used to fidget with it and try and sort of hack it in the way that I could. So I'm a tech enthusiast. I follow a lot of tech news. I'm a big reader. I like to read non-fiction mostly these days. Yeah, that's about me. So I think firstly, I'll take a bit of time to tell people what they might be going through, because I went through something similar, and I feel a lot of our PGP ones are going through the same things, and a reaffirmation of what they're going through would be useful for them at this difficult time. So first of all, I was in a lot of trouble last summer. I thought that all the shortlists are not coming, at least to me. And I felt that it was a tough time. And also we were home, right? So we had a lot of problems there. But this year, people are on campus, and I thought that would solve problems, but actually it hasn't. It's actually like you see everyone who's getting shortlists around you and you're not getting shortlists. So it's a bigger problem. And I understand that, and I hear about it a lot from a lot of our juniors in PGP1. But I think it's quite natural actually. So the shortlist process for product management is such that most of these companies release shortlists quite late. So I would say, first of all, your preparation should be to be patient, because you're going to need a lot of patience, both in the job and in the internship, as well as in the interview process. So be patient a little bit, learn to indulge your interests in other things, and also, of course, focus on your preparation for product management as a whole, for the domain and for your interviews. So I'll get on to the preparation for interviews now. And I think there's several parts to it. So maybe this will be a little longish, and I hope that's all right. So firstly, as a product manager, I think your main job is to define a problem, right? So before I go on to preparation, I'd like to define what a product manager does, at least in my experience at Microsoft. And that is mainly to define a problem which is valuable to solve, which is a problem that the customer has a pain point, and that can be solved profitably by a company or exploited in some way, so that they can deliver value both ways, to the customer as well as to the firm. So that's your main job. Your problem is to find and define problems. That's about it. And it sounds very simple, but it's actually quite complex. In the real world, you're dealing with a large number of variables, very complex regulatory environments, very complex user needs, large number of users, variety of users. And you don't know at the beginning what to do, right? Because as a PM, your job is to answer the why questions, basically. The difference between a PM and a developer, I think, is the developer might know how to implement something or exactly what to implement. But I feel like a PM knows why something would work, why something would not work. So his main job is to sort of hypothesize and theorize about the possibilities of a problem, the ways of solving it, right? So that's really what a PM does in his everyday life. And I feel so as I was saying, the job of a PM is mainly to define these problems and work away at them so that the developer knows exactly what to do. And they don't have to answer any why questions. They can just go ahead with whatever they've been told to implement, or they can go ahead with brainstorming ways to implement it instead of wondering about why they should implement it or what they should implement in what form it should be, right? So that's what a product manager does. And to do that, actually, there's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes to understand the problem, understand who is facing the problem, understanding why they're facing the problem, what is the user flow that they're going through to face the problem, whether there are other people trying to solve the same problem or not, whether there's people wanting to solve the same problem or not, whether the unit economics for solving the problem are good, and so on and so forth. So I think this is what you have to begin to understand as a product manager. And this is really how you need to think about the interviews as well. So when you're a product manager, I think one of the things, this is something I learned in my internship, actually, thanks to my mentor, that you have a couple of responsibility levels. There are various levels at which a product manager works. So that's one axis that you have to think along, responsibility levels, and another axis is where you are in terms of the idea. So whatever you have an idea for, it starts off being very vague, right? So we can think of it as an axis right from the left to the right. And the axis would start from a vague idea. So when you have that vague idea, for example, we take, suppose I have an example that says, I want to solve something for artists, right? It's a very, very vague idea. Now I question this idea. I try to really find the problem. I think there is a problem there, but I don't know exactly what it is, who it is for, and why it's important. So I try to question the idea, right? And then when I question the idea, I get some answers. For example, an answer could be that I'm trying to solve for singers and dancers who perform in tier 1 cities. This would give me a little more specificity. After defining this, I can ask what problem they're facing and why they're facing. And maybe from some research, from some user interviews, I get the idea that they are facing the problem of monetization. They want to earn more money, but they're not earning enough money. And it's because of YouTube, for example, where the monetization is not very good. So for example, I say that I want to solve for singers and dancers in tier 1 cities who are looking to monetize, but are unhappy with YouTube because it doesn't allow them to monetize well enough, right? So that becomes more and more specific. Now we've come a bit away from the very vague idea. So we're moving along the axis, I hope. And then when we keep answering these questions, right, we come to a possibility where you can have a very, very specific set of features, which if you hand over to a developer, they can directly build it out. So that's sort of where we want to reach. That's maybe, let's call it the 0 point. And at that point, you have too many ideas, right? You have far too many ideas. And what you want to do from there is you want to segment and figure out which ideas work well together, which ideas are enough to offer a cohesive, valuable component to a user from which they can complete a task or do a job that they want to do, right? So that is, I think, the MVP phase, trying to go from all of these crazy ideas to something which is actually valuable to a user. That 0 to MVP journey, I think that's a very, very important part. And that's also something that you're asked to do in many of these interviews. But after I explain this whole framework to you, I think it'll become clearer. So you go from this 0 point with a long list of ideas to a point where you have decided that some of these ideas are worth solving at once, are cohesive, work well together, and that's your MVP. That's the first version of your app that you build out, your app or product or service, right? After that, you go on this journey of trying to acquire more users because you want your graph to go up, your usage graph to go up. So you want to acquire more and more users. So you go back and find some people you had neglected earlier. You try to find some problem which is adjacent to the problem you're already solving. and you go back and figure it out, and then you say, hey, I can also solve this now because now this is in my roadmap. I've built out the MVP. Now it makes more sense to do this. It's easier to do this. It will benefit more people, right? So you build it out, and as you build out these things, as you cater to more and more people, as you cater to more and more problems, your usage curve grows, right? So we've reached a point where now we're happy with the number of users we have. Now we want to look at other things and make sure primarily that these users do not drop off, right? So your curve doesn't come down like this, which is a bit of a problem these days, right? So you want to retain them. So this phase would be a retention phase, right? So you want to enhance the moat that you have. For example, YouTube has a moat of users, so it's dual. For a creator, I don't want to go to any other platform because YouTube has so many viewers and I can't get that viewership anywhere else. But for a viewer, I don't want to go anywhere else because I don't have the number of creators. I don't have my recommendations. I don't have an engine which knows me very well, which recommends me stuff that I want to, I want to consume. So that's a mode. Also, all these coupons and cashbacks and credits that you get on various platforms such as Flipkart or Amazon Prime, which is itself the world's largest loyalty service, is a fantastic example of user retention as well. So you want to go on the retention journey, build something which keeps users on the app and keeps them coming back. And after your users stabilize to a certain level where you see, okay, some have dropped off, but enough have remained thanks to my retention tactics, you want to go to the next stage, which is engagement. Maybe people are spending, say, 10 minutes on my app daily. I want to increase that time, maybe double it to 20. And I want to build features which allow my engagement to grow. So when you look at apps like Flipkart integrating video, that's basically what you're trying to do. And many people have this theory, and it's actually a good amount of research on this, that if you get people to spend more time on your application, there is a higher probability that they'll spend. So that's the rough idea here. And I've seen this idea at play even in my time at Infosys when we had a client, a German sports manufacturer, who wanted people to spend more time on their app because they had found through data that the more time people spend, the more they actually spend in terms of money as well on the application. So you want to do this engagement thing. So you can see these things on Flipkart Video. You can see Zomato also introduced a video feature, and you can now understand probably with this thought process why they do so. And there are various other kinds of engagement as well, games and social engagement as well. So you can try that. After we've got a certain amount of engagement, we have come to a point where we have a app or a product which solves a certain amount of problems for a user cohesively, offers enough value for the user to stick around, and engages them for a certain amount of time every day or every week. Now we want to think about monetizing, right? So this is where the access completes. Now, when we get to the end of this access monetization, that we've come from a vague idea to more specificity, then to a point where we have too many ideas, which we can't all do because of basic constraints. And then we go to the MVP. After the MVP, we go through a growth phase. Going through the growth phase, we get to a point where we want to ensure we don't go on a downward curve. So we do some retention. After retention, we want to make sure people spend more time on the app. So we do engagement. And finally, we come to a point where we are thinking about monetizing our stuff, right? So this is the horizontal axis. And the second axis, which I told you earlier, which is the levels of responsibility, this axis would be L1, L2, L3, and L4. So the L4 is the lowest person. Let's think of it as someone who is about 5,000 feet above the ground, and they're looking at the ground very closely. So they're working directly with developers. They're working very, very closely with the business teams maybe, and they're making decisions which are very, very daily in nature, or maybe weekly, very, very short term in the present. So those could be things like the placement of a button or a flow that someone has to do, maybe the color of it as well. So they make those decisions, and they're not really responsible for the strategic roadmap. They're responsible for the execution and low-level choices, right? Above them, probably there's someone who's making a number of these choices together, or is handling other people who are making these choices, and they decide how cohesive something works, how well it works together, and whether those features are being built out correctly or not. So those people also have a short-term timeline. They're probably looking at a couple of weeks instead of a number of days, but they are still short-term and they are still very much focused towards delivery and execution. Above that, I think you have someone whose task is to think 3 to 6 months into the future at level 2, and they're probably handling more strategy. They're handling feature-specific stuff. They're handling the rollout of other new features, as well as handling the impact of what is happening, how it is happening, whether campaigns are running smoothly or not, whether the data on certain metrics is as good as we want it to be, and if not, checking out what to do over there. And finally, above this person, we have someone whose job is probably 2 years into the future, whose job is a little bit like future telling. It's like being clairvoyant and trying to catch the trend of the next 2 years, which they want to expound on and evangelize. And then they sort of, this percolates down to everyone else in the organization thanks to this person's vision. So that guy's job is possibly just vision. That guy probably doesn't do, or that woman up there doesn't do execution. They do strategy and they do vision. So they're looking into the future to try to say how things are today. And in my understanding, these two axes, they interact. And in every single product situation, in any interview, you will probably be dropped in to one of these places on the horizontal axis and in the sort of plane between these two. And you'll be asked to navigate yourself up and down or back and forth, as the case may be. So that's what you're trying to do. And that's what you're going to be asked to do. For example, if you get a case that says we want to increase the voice interactions with our app, for example, for some company, we don't want to name any one particular company, but let's say we want to increase voice interaction. So that would be something that is not daily. That's not someone's responsibility. That's not something that will happen today, but it is something we want to make happen, let's say between 6 months to 2 years in the future. So that will be the level of responsibility that this idea has. And it's a vague idea. It's a very vague idea. We don't know how to implement it into our application. It's slightly a bit of vision looking into the future. So then we again start from this vague idea standpoint. We want to build out voice services or voice assisted services. How can we do that? So again, you keep asking these questions. Who is facing that problem? In what situation are they facing the problem? How valuable is the problem? Is it really necessary that we build out voice assisted services, or are they fine with text? So all of these questions come in, and again, you've sort of gone back to the start of this cycle, which is a feature cycle of coming back from the vague idea right into the end at the right. So when we see such a thing, that's what we should do. We should go back, ask these questions, and come back and forth. And actually, the most common form of preparation, which everyone does, which is the circles framework, it does exactly this thing, right? I haven't mentioned the circles framework till now because I wanted to make it more intuitive for you to understand why we do things the way we do them, why it's useful. So now when I talk of circles, I hope it makes sense, because circles are all about understanding your customer, right? Who they are, then understanding their problems, or first identifying their needs, and then understanding the problem with those needs in the given situation. So that's exactly the sort of thing that we went through in our idea with the example of solving for artists. We asked, who are the artists? What is their problem? Why are they facing that problem? What are they currently using? So that's possibly a sort of parallel approach to the circles framework. So now I think you can see why the circles framework comes so highly recommended by everyone in the industry and everyone among your seniors as well. So that's one way to look at it. And I think this addition of responsibility, the axis of responsibility, allows you to imagine what sort of ideas someone is looking for from you. So if you can immediately identify that this is not something which is going to be a daily thing, then you want to not say things which would be bug fixes. You don't want to say that this box is a little weird or this button doesn't work well, etc. You want to point out things which are looking into the future, 6 to 12 months into the future, as I said. And that's just me. I think if you think something is 12 to 24 months, or if you think even more, that's fine. But then you have to answer questions to the level that those things can become specific, right? So that's basically, for me, the framework of your preparation and how you should think about what you're going to do in an interview. And I'd also like to add what the expectations are in an interview, as far as I can understand from my limited time in Microsoft and through our process as well. The expectation is that you are someone who has clarity of thought, that you are able to articulate it clearly, you have good communication skills, that you are able to think through problems from a user perspective, empathy, that's very important, and that you think out loud, which is also very, very important, because they want to see what you're thinking, how you're thinking. And that's really why the interview is quite so in this format, which is of a product design case, where you might be asked stuff like famous questions like a fridge for blind people, or a chair for kids, or an exercise machine for people above 60, or a social network for women, etc., etc. So that's the sort of thing that you might be asked to do. And if you pick up any of these, you can understand that they start off being a vague idea, where you have to ask those questions to make things more and more specific till you come to a laundry list of features, where you think all of these are impossible to implement at the same time, and then you sort of cut down on them based on some understanding of the user, of the situation, of the problems they're facing, and of the competition that you face in that scenario. And based on that, you sort of cut down and scope it out, go to the MVP, and again, go through the growth and engagement and retention and so on. That's for an app, but of course, for a physical product, that wouldn't make so much sense. But you can understand this is just a framework to think, and you can think of it in various ways in various situations. So I wanted to make you aware of that. And the next question probably would be about how you can go and move back and forth or up and down in these levels. And that I think can only come from really trying to do some practice with this thing, and maybe try and identify a case, try and identify an application, and take its core vague idea, keep asking questions, go through the move of identifying its users, creating a proper user persona, highlighting their pain points, their needs, their requirements, and then going to the problems that they face, defining the problems very well, and then going through the solution. So if you can do this for a number of applications in the real world, let's say pick out 4 or 5 domains such as fintech, e-commerce, maybe media, travel, and education or productivity, maybe take 4 or 5 of these domains and probably split them into the apps that they have in each domain, and then do this entire journey for 2 to 3 apps. I think that would be a very, very insightful way to go about these things. And you can also just Google and read about business models, because really you need to know how the business is thinking about this, because you want to deliver value both to the customer as well as to the company. So you want to understand their business model and why they want to do what they want to do, how the incentives align for different stakeholders at that point in that process, right? So that's probably how you go about this stuff, and you can do this probably very efficiently in a group. If you have like 4 or 5 people and you want to do it together, maybe you can pick these domains, find 5 apps in each domain, and everyone can do 1 app or 2 apps in each domain, and you can create a document with a certain structure. And then that document can be shared later on with other people who've not studied that app. But if you make that document well enough, it will be very, very useful to everyone else as well. And yeah, that's about it for prep. And very long.
That is actually interesting that you explain different stages you have actually done. And can you just name some resources that you can
Yeah, definitely. So one thing that I think is very, very useful is YouTube, especially the Exponent channel on YouTube, which we had a session with the founder of Exponent last year from the PM Tech Club. And I found that extremely insightful. They have a lot of videos on that channel, which you can use to understand how these interviews would progress, and you can sort of binge watch them. Although I would recommend that instead of binge watching, you watch them with a pen and paper in hand and make notes and try to solve the question before the interviewer solves it, right? So that's very useful. And then you can also use things like the Ken. So the Ken, for example, is a fantastic read when it comes to business models. So if you think about a couple of the articles that they've written on the JioMart thing, or on Airtel's business, or on Jio making its entry into mobile phones, and why they do that, I think those are fantastic resources to align your thinking with business, to understand what are the incentives in a system, how a platform is looking to be built here, because in our country we're really in a situation where a couple of platforms are coming up and they're looking to be built. So that's something very important. I also think I've written a blog about this. I think there are a number of resources on there. Twitter is a fantastic resource if you follow the right people, and they can teach you a lot about product management. I think that is the one place where I've learned the most, even during my internship as well as before and after. So if you have a Twitter account, just go and follow people like Shreyas Doshi or Lenny San, or a lot of people who are VCs, venture capital firms, and their Twitter accounts as well, because they can give you a very good idea. They keep retweeting stuff, which is very, very educational, very useful. You can also follow the PM Tech Club of IIM Calcutta, because they follow a lot of these people, and you can find a lot of these useful suggestions in their retweets and likes. So I'd suggest you go ahead and do that, definitely. And apart from Twitter and YouTube, I think Substack, which is a newsletter platform which our Consult Club also uses, I think is a fantastic resource. But the problem of that is, again, discovery, and you can discover good newsletters on Twitter. People keep writing on this. I think Sachin Gupta has a newsletter, an exceptional newsletter on product management. You can check that out, and maybe I'll put in the links with you guys, so you can put it out alongside wherever this is posted. So that might be something which is very, very useful for both PGP1s and PGP2s looking to for product management, I think. Yeah.
So, what are some of the myths that you can think of during the process, like sometimes expectations?
Yeah. So one myth that I personally had was that it was going to be some sort of grilling process, that is going to be very, very stressful. But the wait for the process to start was the part that was stressful. I don't think the process was stressful at all, especially because of the people that I had to interact with. They were very, very cordial, very nice. And in the buddy calls, you mostly have people who are alumni. So that was fantastic because the first 5 minutes are always spent talking about Joka and how the campus is doing and how the faculty are doing, who you are being taught by and what courses you've taken and so on. That's sort of the discussion that ensues. And we got a lot of sympathy last year because we were doing it online, and that's how it started. But apart from that, I think another myth in product management is, I think, that you just keep doing these circles things, you keep applying the framework and it just works. So I think it needs to be a little more intuitive. I think it needs to be making more sense to you as a story. And really, you need to form a hypothesis. I forgot to add this earlier. I think it's crucial to not just go with the framework robotically and come out with some recommendations. Rather, build a hypothesis about your entire understanding of the situation, depending on who the user is, what their problems are, what they're solving to solve their problems, what they're using to solve their problems right now, how it's different, how you can be different, and how you can win in that situation against the competition. And then if you are correct about all of these things and you implement your solution the way that you want to, what will you see as a result of that implementation, as a result of that product move? And that's really why you integrate metrics as well at the end of your answer. When you make this theory, this grand theory about a product, any product, could be Paytm, could be Zomato, could be something new, could be a Zoom for dance classes, I don't know, could be very many things. But you want to form this hypothesis so that it makes sense to yourself. And that hypothesis, when shared with your interviewer, will be the sort of decision-making criteria for them to understand whether you've been thorough enough, whether you understand what a product manager would do, whether you are a good fit for the organization, depending on how your mind has worked in that process, whether you have enough empathy, and so on. So I think it's a big, big myth that you just do, for example, you just do decode and conquer, and then you're done. I don't think that's it. I think that's not it at all. And I haven't mentioned decode and conquer before, but it's common knowledge that you should read some of it before starting out with everything that I said, all the YouTube, all the newsletters, all the Twitter. I think that can come later. Probably start with the basics, understand the job. I tried to explain it to you the best I could, and try to get some additional understanding from YouTube as well as Twitter. And then you can probably try and take a hack at these exponent videos, at these Substack resources and Twitter and all of that. But I think firstly, getting it out of your head that it is robotic and based on just one single framework, which will keep working all the time as if it's some magic pill. I think that's a myth in product management preparation that I would very much like to get rid of, especially because my mentor at Microsoft, Mitali, she was really put a lot of emphasis on getting rid of this idea that frameworks are sacrosanct. For her, frameworks were great, but the framework was only great as long as you understood its utility and you also understood that sometimes you can make your own frameworks. And for example, the responsibility levels thing is a framework that she uses and she taught me, and I'm finding it very useful to integrate this myself. So I presented my framework of product management preparation to you. So I think that's a myth I'd like to get rid of pretty much. Right. So I think my internship experience was not very much related to my MBA because there's nothing that we're taught which I was specifically asked to use, at least not in the classroom. But what is very important is your ability to ask questions, to sort of have a thick skin, because sometimes you can ask stupid questions, and as a product manager, that's your job. You do ask stupid questions a lot of times. And the ability to talk to people, to talk to strangers, to come up to them and approach them for help, ask them for their opinion, take their feedback, and iterate, right? And work on short timelines. So if you've asked someone for an appointment and it gets shifted upwards or downwards, and you have to work on your assignments and in a short time frame, I think that's something we learned very well. as well as collaborating in groups. As a product manager, I think that's very, very important. You have multiple stakeholders. You don't really have any authority over them because you're not managing them. They don't report to you, but you do need their help. You do need their largesse and their kindness to guide you through this path, especially during your intern, because otherwise you're just walking in the dark, maybe even blind. So that's why you need these things. And I think an MBA does teach you some of these things, probably for our PGP ones a little bit more because they're on campus now, whereas just before our summers, we were not. So I think these social skills and the ability to take criticism is quite important. The ability to connect with people and ask the correct questions or even the incorrect questions. And probably you want to do this in a manner which people don't hate you for. So a little bit of a jolly attitude might help as well. And I think going through all the troubles, finding all the friends that you do in your MBA, I think that will allow you to do all this. But coming to my internship in particular, I was working with a division of Microsoft called Experiences and Devices, and particularly in their supply chain. So we had this idea of a supply chain data platform. I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with this sort of thing, but basically it's something which helps you solve a lot of the problems with data that people would face in a supply chain. That's basically it. And my job was to understand what we had built internally. So Microsoft has a huge supply chain of its own because it's in some ways a device manufacturer as well, a device seller at least in terms of the Surface Books, and as well the servers for the Azure services across the world. So we need to have our supply chains working well. And for that reason, we need data. To handle that data, we built this platform for ourselves using a lot of Azure components across the board. So it's an entire stack which is consisting of Azure components, and it's built specifically for our supply chain. And we thought that it was very useful for us. We derived a lot of value from it. And my job was to verify whether this could be useful for other people as well. There was a theory internally from my manager that this could be something which we can, allow other people to use as well to deliver value for them. And therefore, it was something that I was allowed to investigate. And my job was to figure this out. So I spoke to users, not users of this application, of course, because they were internal. But I spoke to people across a number of India's top companies who do have large supply chains in the automotive, health technology, FMCG spaces. And speaking to them, I understood what problems they face, what technologies they're currently using, and what problems they face with the technologies that they are using, and how we can solve it for them. So based on their sort of the conversations with them, I came up with an understanding of the space and what is needed for the space and developed an MVP. And based on that MVP, I was to compare with our internal product and see how it matches up and whether we can take it to market. And if we can take it to market, then what are the differences? How valuable are they? Should we build them out or not? And also to build a revenue projection for what is possible for this sort of service in the real market. And I did all of that. And I was also supposed to do a GTM for the service, but I ran out of time because this was a lot of work anyway. Very, very interesting work, very hands-on work, talking to users, talking to business users on our own side, talking to our data science teams who utilize this platform and its abilities to develop the magic that sort of runs the platform, allows our supply chains to be a well-oiled machine. And that's what I did during the internship. And apart from this, I think I also spent a lot of time talking to people inside Microsoft about Microsoft itself, understanding its values, what it is as a company, why it is the way it is, and asking about their experiences as well. And this is something that I highly recommend all our interns to do because it's a great thing to do. You can always catch up with someone and understand the motivations for them to work in a particular job. And you can also understand where the company is headed, whether it's good for you as a person, whether you're a cultural fit, whether you're a personality fit. And it also allows the company to evaluate you. And this is a two-way thing. So it's fantastic, a fantastic experience to have. And you get to meet so many people, right? So I was able to make connections with people all the way across the world in America, and also was part of some calls with people from other parts of the world as well. Some people were from Hong Kong, and I think other people were also from Ireland, which is a big Microsoft office. So I think that's something from my internship which I really, really enjoyed, the interaction with people and understanding who they are, why they want to be here, what they're doing, what they've been doing for the past few years, what they're looking to do in the future. And I tried to seek out a lot of product managers because I was completely clueless about product management before I went in. And I think it's paid off because I am a little more clued in about product management now. than I was before after in the internship. And of course, the opportunity to interact with people from other B schools as well, Indian B schools across the board from IIM, B, Lucknow, and XLRI and FMS and MD, and the chance to make a lot of friends, which I did, and hopefully carry them forward in the future. I think that's a very important part of the internship and really valuable to me personally. So I'd highly recommend that everyone do that as well.